Hello and welcome to the Daily Fabric Fondle here at Cottonweeds Quilt Shop in Freeport, Maine. Today I am going to show you a really fun project that is great for kids to do. It is a fun project for either them to sew for themselves or to make a bunch for friends and family, especially with the holidays coming up. So I'm going to walk you through the steps. What we're going to make is a treasure bag. Here is my treasure bag. So here's my treasure bag, and it's got one fabric on the front, different one on the back, and then inside we put a lining so that it hides the seams. Okay, you can kind of see there, these are my two pieces on the inside, my lining part, and I don't see any seams, which is really nice for kids to learn how to do. And then the bag technically is also reversible. There's a small stitch on the inside where we close up the hole, and you'll see that during the process later as we go through all the steps. So let's get started making a treasure bag. Step number 1 to making our treasure bag is to choose the fabric. This often is the most favorite part of the process. When we do this project with the kids in the after-school sewing classes, they love choosing fabric. So for our treasure bag, we need 4 pieces of fabric. I'm going to use the same 2 for the outside and the same 2 for the inside, but you could pick 4 different fabrics as well. I am going to use Moda's Ombre Fairy Dust collection because it's just so pretty. It is ombre, which means it goes from light to dark. And it has some fun, glittery silver stars. Let's touch. Very nice. Nice feel to this fabric, and that is what I'm going to use for my treasure bag. I think I'm going to put the blue on the outside and the pink on the inside as the lining. Next step is the cutting. We're going to cut 4 pieces at 8 by 9.5 inches. That seems like a good size for most kids to put treasures in and to carry around without being too cumbersome. But you can clearly adjust the size to be whatever you want. Some kids have made them a little smaller to fit a phone in. Some kids have made them a little bigger because they wanted to fit a certain book in or a couple of books in there. So play with the size, but today on the fondle, we're going to do 8 by 9.5. So I'm going to cut 2 8 by 9.5 pieces of the pink and 2 8 by 9.5 pieces of the blue. Here are my 4 pieces. I've got 2 for the outside of the bag and 2 for the inside of the bag. Let's head to the sewing machine. Here we are with my 4 pieces. I'm almost ready to sew. What I'm going to do is I've got my outside and my inside. I'm going to take one of my outside pieces, doesn't matter which one. I'm going to take one of my inside pieces, doesn't matter which one. I'm going to put them right sides together. And I'm going to even them out as best as I can with one hand. You presumably will have 2 hands. All right, so there we go. They're right sides together. And next I'm going to pin just across one of the short sides, and that's where I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, if you have directional fabric, you're going to want, so here's a bag that someone had started. Their snowmen are directional. So when they put their pieces right sides together, I've even got their, it's already sewn here. So right sides together, here's the seam, and the snowmen are, facing you in the correct direction when the seam is at the top. Okay, so you can see the snowmen are not upside down, okay? They're standing as they should be standing, seam across the top if you have directional fabric. That way it won't be upside down on your bag. All right, so I'm going to get this top pinned and we're going to do some sewing. We are pinned and we're ready to sew a 1/4 inch seam just across this one side. Just want to point out to you a little something on my machine. You've seen my machine on the fondle before. But when sewing with kids, especially, although I use it as well, I put a piece of tape so that when the presser foot is down and my fabric is in the machine, If I keep it right along that tape, if I butt it right up against the tape, that's going to give me a consistent 1/4 inch seam allowance, okay, which is great for kids to have a visual, especially so they can keep the fabric straight as it's coming up the machine, and they don't have it like this going through the presser foot. So this tape is really helpful for adults included, like myself. Here we go, keeping that fabric right against the green tape. Stop and take your pin out, right? We don't want to run over any pins, right, Michelle? She's notorious for sewing over pins. Okay, here we go. Stop. Take out the pin. And right off the edge. You do not have to backstitch at the beginning or end of this because there's going to be another seam that goes across it. There's my 1/4 inch seam across the top. I am now going to take my other 2 pieces. I should have an outside and an inside piece. Same thing. I'm going to put right sides together. And I'm going to, again, just sew across one of the short sides. Here's what you should have at this point. You've got a lining piece sewn to an outside piece, and another lining piece sewn to an outside piece. Okay, just across one of the short sides. So I have 2 giant rectangles. I'm going to press the seams, and then I'll show you the next step. Now it's time to pick some rickrack for the handle for the bag. I'm going to go with gray. Whoopsie! So it kind of matches the silver in the bag. It's a little dark, but that's okay. I'm going to go with that. So you want to try to size it for the person that is going to be wearing the bag, which if it's a gift is a little tricky. But basically what we have the kids do is wrap the rickrack around their shoulders and get an idea of where they want the bag to lay against their hip and cut it there. Longer is always better than shorter. If it ends up being too long and the bag is too far down the leg, you can always put a knot in the rickrack to shorten it up. But if it's too short to begin with, it's really hard to make it longer. So that's always our tip to kids, is better to go long and have a little extra than to be strangled by your own treasure bag. Here's how you're going to lay out your handle so that it'll be in the proper place and it'll make a proper loop to go around your body. You're going to take one end of your rickrack, you're going to lay it on, and it doesn't matter which rectangle right now that you're working with, but you want to lay it on the outside fabric, that's my blue, so that it's just sticking out a little bit. Then you're going to make sure that there's no twists and turns in it. So I've already laid it out lengthwise and made sure there were no twists in it. And I laid the other end on the other side of the outside fabric, the little tail sticking out. And it's going to the rest of it now that's untangled. Oh, except I just moved it. There we go, you stay there. This big pile of, we're going to pin that in a second, This pile in the middle has to stay in the middle. If it creeps out towards the seam while you're sewing the next step, it's going to get caught in there and you're going to have a really random little loop of handles sticking out of your bag. So you want to make sure that this is going to stay right in the middle. Okay, so I'm going to pin each of these ends of the rickrack in place so they don't wiggle like they've been doing. And then we're going to make a sandwich. I've got my 2 rectangles side by side. I've got my 2 inside fabrics right next to each other. My 2 outside fabrics right next to each other. Because now I'm going to put them right sides together in a sandwich. And you want to make sure your outside pieces are touching each other and your inside pieces are touching each other. And we're going to line it up real nice all the way around the rectangle. So I'm going to even this out. I'm going to do some pinning and I'm going to show you where to leave a hole so we can right side out this after we've sewn around it. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to pin. I'm going to even it up and pin. Make a mark for a hole. Be right back. Here we are. We've got our 2 big rectangles right sides together. Just remind you that we've got our lining pieces right sides together. our outside pieces right sides together. Okay, I've pinned all the way around. The outside section should have a big lump rickrack in it, and it's going to stay in the middle of our sandwich so that it doesn't get caught in the seams. I have added to the bottom of the lining side a place to leave a hole. If you are sewing with children, it is great to label so that they know where to start and stop. So they're going to start at this line. This is where I would do a little forward and a little back stitch to give it some reinforcement where you're going to be inside, well, right side outing it. Little arrow, so they're going to be sewing down to the corner, and they're going to be sewing all the way around the rectangle, all the way till they get to the stop. Do another back stitch there. Okay, we'll do a quick review of how to do corners. I'm sure if you are an adult watching this video, you probably know how to do a corner, but just in case, we will do a quick review of how to do a corner, and we're going to sew all the way around the bag. Okay, here am I at the start mark. I'm going to take this pin out so he's not in the way. So at my start line, I'm going to go forward a couple stitches. I'm going to use my back stitch, back a couple stitches, and then we're going to sew to the corner, but we're going to stop about a 1/4 inch before. Right about there. We're going to make sure our needle is down, and we're going to lift the presser foot. There we go. I needed focus. Lift the presser foot, turn. All right, now I'm just going to keep sewing. I've taken a corner, so now I'm going to go all the way around the rectangle. Let's do it. All right, I'm coming upon my stop mark, so I want to pay attention. I want to stop around the mark. You can tell the kids it doesn't have to be exact. And I'm going to do a little back stitch. All right, needle up, take the project out, trim the threads, and we'll take a look at our seams. We're going to check corners before we right side out. Here's my beautiful 1/4 inch seam allowance. I just like to go to each corner, make sure that we've caught both pieces of fabric in the stitch and nothing wiggled. Even when you pin it, sometimes, especially the corners, wiggle. But it looks like I've got good corners. You can see my rickrack is sticking out, which means that's good. That's where I want it sticking out. I want it caught in the seam there and here, because that's my handle. Everything else should still be in the middle, hopefully. Let's right side out it. This is what you should have. You've got a long rectangle still. You've got your lining fabrics together, outside fabrics together, and a big handle that was not caught in the side. Nice. And you've got a hole down here in your lining, your inside fabrics. It's good to have some kind of stick tool to put into this hole and work the corners out real nice. So I'm going to go to each corner and work them out. Then what you want to do is head to the iron and just tuck these flaps in so they're nice and even. We're going to press that down so we can make a nice stitch across it to close up the hole. Here we are back at the sewing machine. So I've pressed my little flaps in here so they're nice and flat. And now I'm going to stitch pretty close to the edge to close up that hole. You want to be able to catch those flaps with the stitch, and so you don't want to be too far in. You actually don't want to use your green tape. Sometimes kids like for us to draw them a little line close to the edge. But basically you want to go forward a little, back a little, right along the edge. This also tells them where the hole ends, and do a back stitch there. So we're going to do that. Back stitch. So there's our stitch that's going to close up that hole. So this is the part where it's kind of fun to watch the kids try to figure out the last step of the bag, because basically you're done with the bag. You're done with all the stitching, you're done with all the sewing, and kids will hold it up and be like, this is not a bag. They're like, where do I put my stuff? There's no hole to put my things in. And so we'll say to the kids, you have to put the inside of the bag inside the bag. We give them a little riddle, because, you know, might as well make them think about it, right? Instead of just telling them how to do it. So at this point, some of the kids right away get it. They're like, oh, I know what to do. And they do it immediately. Some kids are like, they got to think about it a little bit. They play with it a little bit, and then they get it. And then some poor kids are like, I don't understand what's happening. And so we don't torture them for too long. We do eventually give them the last step. But here we go. You're going to put the inside of the bag inside the bag. Okay, so here's the outside of my bag. My inside of the bag is going inside the bag, which is hard to do one-handed. So here's me getting it started. And I'll show you in a second how it ended up. You did it! You made a treasure bag! There's our lining, which I just stuffed inside. Here's the outside. Nice. Handle. Awesome. And you are done with your treasure bag. A quick project. I mean, that took what? I don't even know how long. 10 minutes? Maybe a little more? If a child is sewing for the first time, it might take a little longer, but you can whip these puppies out in no time. Gifts for all this holiday season. Look how nice. And they've learned how to line a bag. No seams inside. Right? No raw edges? That's great. Kids love these bags, I'm telling you. They really love to make them because they're quick and they feel accomplished. Simple handle. I mean, you could do more complex handles, but why? If you have rickrack hanging around or a ribbon, twine, anything for the handle that you don't have to actually construct would be great for this kind of bag. Let me model it for you. Check it out. I got my own treasure bag. It's a pretty good size. I like where it hangs. If I wanted it a little higher, all I'd have to do is take it off, take the rickrack here, make a little knot in it, to make it a little shorter. Still goes around my head. Now it's a little bit higher on my body, right? Oh, it's beautiful. These are really so fun to make. If I go to the beach, I could put some shells in here, some rocks. Could put a little book in here. If I'm going on a long car ride, this could be my bag of fun. Perfect project for kids. We are going to take a little break from filming fondles for the Thanksgiving holiday week. So we will see you soon. Beginning of December, we'll be back with more fondles. Thanks for joining us today on the Daily Fabric Fondle.